Good morning, Riverside. My name is Amanda Meisenheimer. I'm the Minister of Children and Families here at the Riverside Church, and we are bringing a little bit of our church to you this morning, which means that we bring in our own screen. We like to use a screen for cues, and I also like to show art and pictures as I tell the story to our children so that they can use their imaginations and their brains to kind of expand what this story might mean today. Today, we look at one of my favorite parables, the parable of the persistent widow. Jesus wants to encourage people to be persistent, consistent, constant. And when I think about persistence, there's a person that comes to mind in my life. In fact, her middle name is Constance. I think about my daughter, Betsy, that you just met reading the scripture. But this picture is another version of Betsy. If you're listening online or you can't see the screen, I've got a picture of a very determined 2-year-old on our screen today. Betsy Meisenheimer is one of the most persistent, consistent, determined people I know. When she was 4, she asked if she could go swim in the deep end and jump off the side. I said, "No, you don't know how to swim yet." That child walked over to the side, jumped in, and swam halfway across the pool out of sheer determination. Betsy Meisenheimer ran her first 5K with me when she was 6 years old with no training or practice, and she finished 8 minutes before I did. But one day, when I first moved to New York and got my first job as a director of children and youth, her determination threw me off a little bit. You see, I don't know if you know this, but a preacher's kid is supposed to behave themselves. She had been to Sunday school that morning. She was 3. She had been through church, which was long and boring. And then it was time for lunch in the fellowship hall. And in lunch in the fellowship hall in this particular congregation, it was a long buffet line of healthy food. And then at the end of the line is a huge, beautiful chocolate cake. My daughter will eat the healthy food first, I thought. I wanted to show everyone that I'm a responsible parent, that I do what I'm supposed to do, that I don't put up with any nonsense in my family, and Betsy showed everyone otherwise. Betsy saw that chocolate cake at the end of the line, and she knew that's what she needed. She knew she needed that after performing in Sunday school, after performing as the pastor's child in church. Being 3 years old, missing her nap, she knew what she needed. And she let everyone know. It took me a little while to figure it out. It took her throwing herself on the floor. She did give me permission to share this, by the way. Kicking off her shoes, which is one of her signature moves. Screaming and crying, cake, 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 cake. And I thought to myself, my child is the pastor's kid. She must pull it together. Thankfully, one of my colleagues came and showed me what a loving, reasonable parent would do in that situation. She grabbed a piece of cake, she scooped up my daughter, and took her upstairs. And later, as my daughter met me again with icing all around her mouth, "I'm sorry, Mom," she smiled at me. I learned something that day about determination, about what a child needs. And it makes me wonder if children are the very best protesters there are. They will do a die-in, a lie-in, a sit-in, a scream-in, and they will outlast you. And sometimes they should. Sometimes they should. It reminds me of this parable. And when I teach parables on the 3rd floor with our 1st through 6th graders, we use art. And we look at art to learn something about religious art, but also to say, does this really reflect what's happening in the picture? So I want to start with this piece from 1628. This is a Dutch piece from the artist Peter de Grebber. And if I were talking with the children, one of the first things we would notice is that this piece of art depicting the persistent widow looks nothing like ancient Palestine. We would say, she looks awfully Dutch to me. We would say, there aren't books in ancient Palestine, and she's holding a book. If you're listening online, we're looking at a white woman in 17th century clothing with a black veil tucked behind her head, who's clearly grieving, and the judge is depicted behind her. Now, what we might notice also is that what is special about this depiction is that she is brought to the forefront. This desperate woman who needs help from her oppressor is illuminated. Meanwhile, the judge is in the shadows. We might learn something from this picture, but it certainly doesn't capture the desperation of the moment. So we could go 200 years in the future. I've got a picture. It's a wood carving that's meant for printing inside Bibles of the parable. This is 200 years later in 1864, Sir John Everett Millais. We'll get that up there for you. And Sir John Everett created this elaborate wood etching that has Roman soldiers in it, and a judge, and the woman leaning in, and there you can sense some desperation. We don't have it here, I guess. But we would also say to ourselves, that woman is not centered. And this story is about the desperate woman who says, make things right for me. Someone is treating me badly. So we would say to ourselves, nope, not this one either. And we would look ahead to a modern piece. This is an illustration created by a woman named Lily Padula. She lives in Brooklyn, and she created this piece for the NPR. And this piece is a depiction of grieving widows in Zimbabwe. And you can see that the water is up to her nose. And we might say to ourselves, that looks like desperation. That looks like someone who is panicked. Someone who is saying, make things right for me. Someone is treating me badly. And the judge looks back at her and he says, I don't care about God or people. Go away. But then I might ask the children, okay, that's a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. But who is suffering today? Who is clinging to the hope that they might find justice, saying, make things right for me? Someone is treating me badly. How about a child? What if the persistent woman is a child who needs mental health services, but the cost isn't covered by insurance? The system doesn't care about God or people. Make things right for me. Someone is treating me badly. What if the persistent widow is an African American child who is disproportionately suspended because of the color of their skin, receiving harsher discipline, coping with discriminatory dress code policies that criminalize natural hair or disruptions to the gender binary? The school-to-prison pipeline doesn't respect God or people. Make things right for me. Someone is treating me badly. What if the persistent widow is a Guatemalan child who is fleeing warfare, abuse, poverty, and disease, but ends up in a cage dying from the flu? A border wall doesn't care about God or people. Make things right for me. Someone is treating me badly. What if the persistent widow is a child from the Amazon whose habitat is stolen, mowed down, burned, and cultivated? Logging companies and oil conglomerates don't respect God or people. Make things right for me. Someone is treating me badly. Or, most recently, what if the persistent widow is a Kurdish child whose people group is betrayed, bombed, and displaced by a man who doesn't seem to care about God or people? Make things right for them. Someone is treating them badly. The unjust judge doesn't respect God. The unjust judge doesn't respect people. He gives in to this woman because she is annoying. Our version today says, if I don't do this, she's just going to beat me black and blue. It's a Greek phrase. It just means she's going to annoy me to death. But Jesus says that's what the world's like out there. We protest, we prostrate ourselves, we throw holy tantrums to get justice. And it is the good and righteous way to respond. Toddlers are right to sit in, die in, prostrate themselves, kick off their shoes, and scream. Make things right for me. Someone is treating me badly. But the good news of Jesus, of this parable, is that the unjust judge is not God. God is nothing like the unjust judge. God requires no flailing, no screaming, no self-flagellation. God is a loving parent who knows her child's needs, knows that her 3-year-old is tired, and says, today we're skipping the line and we're getting the chocolate cake. God is a loving parent. We usually look at a modern piece. This is a piece by an Indian artist named Dattatreya Thrambare. And it's called Father and Child, but I love that you really don't know who the parent is, who the child is, but there is care and there is safety in this picture. God is a loving parent, not an unjust judge. The world is an unjust place for widows and children. I think we should say that again on Children's Sabbath Sunday. The world is an unjust place for widows and children. But there is a safe place. There is a just place. There is a place where a 3-year-old is fed up with church and gets a big piece of cake. And that place is in the palm of God's hand. Now, I learned my lesson. You won't see me marching my daughter to South Hall to eat her vegetables after she has spent a long day here at the Riverside Church. Right? That's right. Because sometimes 3-year-olds know what's best. Sometimes the children across the world who are screaming in pain, who's sometimes screaming into the void and aren't heard, they know what they need. They know what they need. We just have to listen and say, sometimes Betsy gets her dessert. The word of the Lord. Or, I'm done. I don't.